an RTE podcast series.
He was running Ireland's most successful pirate radio station.
This is Radio Dublin on 2.5.
But behind closed doors, what was Eamon Cooke capable of?
The abuse was gradual.
We had no idea of how ruthless he was.
The full and disturbing story of serial child abuser Eamon Cooke.
This series uncovers new victims that have remained silent until now.
Pirate Predator. Listen on RTE Radio Player or wherever you get your podcasts.
When we went looking for information on Eamon Cooke, we found this curious article in the newspaper archives.
Sunday Independent, March 11th, 1973. Calling Alpha 7, the crime buster who goes to war in a Jag. Nightly, a coal black Jaguar car swishes into the centre of Dublin from a South City suburb.
Eamon Cooke, who we now know was a paedophile and a radio boss, had yet another identity.
Behind the wheel is Dublin's crime buster extraordinaire and the Garda Síochána's unofficial secret weapon in their war on the city's criminals. His name is Eamon Cooke. Slightly built and only 5'8", he has in fact set himself up as a vigilante to help Gardaí fight the housebreakers, car hijackers and a host of other forms of crime.
It seems Eamon Cooke was cozying up to the police on Garda Síochána, who even gave him a nickname.
The radio operators in Dublin Castle have given him the name Alpha 7. Most patrol cars in the southwest area of the city are named Alpha, but there are only 6 of them. Thus, Alpha 7 was the natural choice for Cooke's identification.
In the early 1970s, Eamon Cooke listened into the police radio, and during the night he would just turn up at crime scenes, often before the Gardaí got there.
In the space of 5 years, this part-time Inchicore sleuth has rescued scores of Gardaí from being attacked, helped dozens of people get away from mugging attacks, and been involved in numerous rooftop chases against housebreakers.
But Eamon Cooke didn't just turn up. According to an interview he gave to the Sunday Independent, Gardaí actually paid him to get involved. Like when they were trying to recover £2,000 in stolen jewellery in what became known as Operation Silverman.
It was coming up to Christmas and an informer told detectives the thief was anxious to get rid of the silver for cash.
These are the words of Eamon Cooke, being read by an actor.
One night it was arranged that I would be introduced to him as a prospective buyer. I met him as arranged in Smithfield and we agreed to do a deal. It was agreed that I would go back for the money to my house. Instead, I went back to Kevin Street Station and cleaned out the boot of my car, of the spare wheel, etc.
Cooke said he was paid about £20 for his expertise in Operation Silverman, roughly a week's wages for a Garda back then.
Then the 2 detectives who set up the job hid themselves in the boot, and I drove back with the money to the thief. When the stage came for handing over the silver for the money, I insisted he put it in a suitcase and place it himself in the boot. Of course, when we opened the boot, the 2 detectives jumped out and arrested the crook, who was just standing there with the big bag of silver in his arms.
It's difficult to understand how Gardaí did not know this Caped Crusader was a seasoned criminal with a record for violence, theft and firearm offences, while secretly destroying children's lives. But Cooke played the optics perfectly. Project innocence, stay within the lines, and keep the law on his side. I'm Peter Mulryan. From RTE Documentary on One, this is Pirate Predator. A quick word before we begin. If you ever had any contact with Eamon Cooke, or have any information on him, please contact us in confidence at documentaries@rte.ie, or you can leave an anonymous tip through our website, rte.ie/Pirate Predator. And a warning, this episode contains references to child sexual abuse. Episode 2, The Innocent.
called the Blue Wild Angel.
As a kid in the 1970s, it sometimes felt like the 20th century was happening elsewhere.
The man with the guitar, Jimi Hendrix.
We'd snatch glimpses in magazines or movies or TV shows. But outside these bubbles, Ireland seemed fossilised.
Farming, or working in any way here, is not easy. And those who must live here often feel the rest of the world has forgotten them.
It's 11:55. This is the Raspberries.
Except, that is, for radio rebels who started their own illegal hobby radio stations from their bedrooms in defiance of the law of the land, which licensed just one station in the country, Radio Éireann.
I was always fascinated by radios.
One of those radio rebels was Don Moore, or Dr. Don, as he was known on air.
Even as a kid of 5, shortwave on the radio at home in Ballyfermot.
Don died in 2021, but we do have some tape from older interviews he gave.
I met Eamon Cooke way back in about 1972, and there was a repair shop for TVs and radios in Thomas Street. And I was probably 19 or 20 wandering by. I rambled into the shop, which was full of TVs.
When Don first met Eamon Cooke, he appeared like a normal guy, aged in his 30s, an electrician with a special talent for all things electrical, technical, and radio related. Nothing about his public persona suggested he was a serial child abuser.
But very interestingly, it had a taxi radio receiver in the corner. And this fascinated me more than anything, because I was pretending to be interested in the conversation with this little man, Eamon Cooke. And at the same time, I was listening to the radio with the taxi messages.
This was the same high-powered VHF radio police used, and which transformed Cooke into Alpha 7, the Gardaí's so-called unofficial secret weapon.
He used to tell me these fantastic stories about while we were all in bed asleep, he was out driving in his old Jaguar. And on the Jaguar, he had this crash bar built into the front of it, where he could ram cars. But he could tell me about domestic disputes, factories going on fire, car crashes, things that were going on, because he was listening to the police calls and then going along and showing up.
Cooke operated like this during the hours up to and after midnight, often until 2 a.m. or later.
I actually found Eamon Cooke to be like a character from a Batman movie. He reminded me of a child who never grew up, and he didn't seem to need a lot of sleep. Now, he didn't drink, smoked like a trooper. My wife called him Dirty Shirty because he always had a black mark on his shirt, as if he fell asleep in his shirt and jacket and woke up and just carried on.
While Eamon Cooke patrolled the streets of Dublin at night, playing cops and robbers, by day, his garage, packed as it was with electronic items, lured in the neighbourhood children.
He'd always be around, like you'd see him. It was a very gradual thing.
This is Siobhan, whom we heard at the end of episode 1.
The first recollection I have is I was playing with this phone. It was a cream phone.
Cooke would bait a trap.
And I was always playing with that.
And wait.
And one day it was on a higher shelf and I couldn't reach it. And I distinctly remember at that time young girls wore slips, under their dresses. And I remember he lifted me up to reach the telephone, and that's the first time that the hands went up under my dress, on my slip. But I didn't think anything of that because I just wanted to get the phone. And then he lifted it down and then I played away. So it was a very gradual process.
That process was what we now know as grooming. And Siobhan's friend, Anne, was also there.
And it was in the garage where the abuse began. That's where he began to use his hands inappropriately, lift us inappropriately, ask us to do things that were now, you can say they were inappropriate. At the time, they were just, oh, that's odd. Oh, that's strange. there wasn't even much discussion between us because he seemed very good at isolating, and doing it individually at that time.
Siobhan and Anne weren't the only local children playing at Eamon Cooke's house.
Then one day he came down. I think there was about 6 of us in the garden. Now, there was girls and boys, and he asked us would we like to be on the television. We said, how? So he got a cine camera and he was recording us, asking us to run up and down the pathway, and then a group of us got in a line and he said, like, kick your legs as if you're doing the can-can. And we thought it was really funny and we thought it was great. And he said, I'll show you on the television someday.
He said, oh, come back whenever and I'll let you know when it's ready and you can come in and watch it. And we all went in to watch the movie.
When we were allowed into the house, we were allowed to play with the piano, we were allowed to use his phone, we were allowed to do things that we'd never be allowed to do at home. But the interesting thing was, he brought us upstairs and showed us the projection in the bedroom, in the top bedroom.
Cooke now had the trust of these children, built up over several months. Then, all of a sudden, one evening, with everyone looking at themselves flickering on a screen, he made his move.
That was the first time he specifically put his hand down the back of my body and under. And it was within the group. We were all standing watching and I was slightly at the back. He touched me from behind. So I froze. I just didn't know what that was. Everybody else was like laughing and having fun and I wanted to, but I didn't know how to handle that.
Remember, by now, this group of children were routinely up and down to Cooke's bedroom. It was the place they watched images of themselves being projected onto a small screen.
And then he'd sit in the bed and he'd rub your back or he'd, rub you. And you wouldn't be paying any attention because you're too focused on looking at yourself and your friends. But it was a gradual touch. So it became second nature then.
This is the difficulty about understanding what grooming is. It's such a gradual, step-by-step manipulative tool that these men use. You're in too deep as a child.
And then Cooke began to take things even further with these now 7- and 8-year-olds.
And then one day he just exposed himself. Kind of got a bit of a fright until he explained it's just another part of your body, like your arm or your leg or your ears. And then we just got used to seeing that too. So it was a very gradual experience.
You have to remember all this abuse is happening in a regular 2-bedroomed suburban house on Dublin's south side. The same home where Eamon Cooke's first wife, Helena, died, and where he now lived with his second wife, Joan, who Siobhan remembers.
Joan, she was a very sad-looking woman. Didn't say very much. She used to make us bread and jam or give us an apple, and they had no children. And she wasn't like our mummies. She always looked older. And at the time, she was very kind. But she wasn't there that often. She'd be there once or twice, I think.
Nothing suggests Joan knew anything of Cooke's abuse. She appears to be yet another victim of her cunning husband's manipulation.
He'd say she was gone away for the weekend, but we found out years later that he used to put her into an institution and say she was sick or she was drinking or something like that. Her nerves.
With his wife out of the way, Eamon Cooke was free to abuse children at will.
I remember when his wife went in on one of our visits to the hospital, there was 2 particular young girls that used to come around and they'd stay overnight. They were a little bit older, I'd say they were about 14 or 15. And I used to find that very strange because how could you not go home to your own bed?
No one knows how many young lives Cooke ruined during this time. But for children like Siobhan, the whole situation was really confusing.
But eventually I started putting two and two together when I was in the bed then one time, and he started to, go a little bit further with us. And I started thinking, this doesn't feel right. It was more what he was doing. Like the way it was when I was growing up, if I had an earache or a toothache or whatever, you'd run into your parents and you'd get into bed, and like my dad had raw pajamas and he'd give you a hug and give you stuff for your ear and calm you down back into bed. But Eamon Cooke was naked. And I remember saying, my dad doesn't be like this. My dad doesn't touch me like this. And that's when I started to get a sense of awareness. But still I didn't say anything.
With Cooke already having abused multiple children, he was now about to develop another interest, one which would eventually give him unrivaled access to children: pirate radio.
The original Radio Dublin from '66 had gone off the air.
Don Moore, or Dr. Don as he became known, inadvertently provided Cooke with the perfect opportunity to get involved.
But I got the transmitter into my possession, a hobby pirate transmitter. But the transmitter wasn't working, so 74 into 75, I found myself coming to Mr. Cooke, asking him to fix the transmitter. Now, he was no more interested in me, or in fixing the transmitter, or in the idea of Radio Dublin, but I was fascinated by it. He actually fixed the transmitter, and off I went, and I really didn't hear from him for probably another year.
Okay, this is Dr. Don doing a test here with the Radio Dublin transmitter.
And by that time I had established Radio Dublin every week, 4 or 5 hours on a Sunday afternoon.
On 6260 kilohertz in the 49 metre band in shortwave on the 19th of October, celebrating 1 year off the air, after being 1 year on the air, and they'll be back again for many, many more years, we hope. And good morning.
On the 1st of March, 1975, Radio Dublin returned with Dr. Don at the helm and with one Eamon Cooke in the background as technical support.
Very good morning there to Eamon Cooke. Just got in, Eamon, after being at the airport, listening in. A very good signal out there at the airport. A very, very good signal indeed. Good morning there to
Pirate radio in Dublin was coming of age, so attracted two things that interested Eamon Cooke: power and money.
He was getting more and more interested because more and more things were happening. I was becoming, and my wife Debbie Moore, we were becoming celebrities. We were being invited to receptions, and we were being invited to all kinds of things to do with the bands. So it was getting very, very exciting. A little bit of advertising started. So it was really starting to move towards the end of '76. And Cooke tended to come back on the scene more and more as he realised more and more that it was becoming like a real radio station.
But Eamon Cooke, or Dirty Shirty as Don's wife Debbie called him, hadn't improved his appearance or personal hygiene. He was scruffy, unkempt, and always stank of the Rothmans cigarettes he chain-smoked.
It was a little bit of an embarrassment having to bring Cooke along, because slowly he was assuming that he was part of the management team of Radio Dublin, and he was assuming that he was part of the ownership of the radio station.
It's important to remember, pirate radio stations were unlicensed, so operating illegally. If you ran a pirate station, the Department of Posts and Telegraphs, who monitored radio frequencies along with Gardaí, could literally kick your door down, seize equipment, and you could end up in court.
When a further raid occurred, and again no equipment was found, but this time Post Office were on tape.
This is a new DJ, it is. You're doing a good job.
So Dr. Don had to move the transmitter around to avoid detection.
We had my mother's house in Ballyfermot, and the aerial went straight across to my sister's house across the road, perfectly 150 feet away. So we had those two locations.
There's a lady here who says she can't stop loving me. Oh, it's the song you wanted.
And then my house in Cabra. So Cooke was saying slowly that he would set up in Sarsfield Road, so we'd have another location.
Don't need to get it wrong. All right. Tuesday afternoon, 2:57.
By now, Cooke's days as a Cape Crusader, Alpha 7 for An Garda Síochána had ended. And rather than helping Gardaí, he was now becoming a problem for them.
We were broadcasting away there, and all of a sudden these collection of cars and squad cars pulled up.
Eamon Cooke later spoke about one of those early raids when Radio Dublin was still based in Ballyfermot at Dr. Dunn's house.
All the people rushed into a house, pulled the house to bits, searching for our transmitter. They picked the wrong house. There were we looking out the window directly opposite them. Most times they went to the right house.
Mm-hmm. You must have had a lot of supporters in those days to be able to...
Yes, there simply wasn't anything in the way of music on radio.
Yes.
Because there was a certain danger associated with pirate radio, I wonder if this was also part of the draw for Eamon Cooke. It definitely wasn't his voice or knowledge of the pop music scene, as he himself said when he was interviewed.
Can you remember the first time that you went before a microphone, Eamon Cooke?
Probably can't, no.
Were you...
I dread microphones.
You don't like microphones?
No,
especially when I walk up to you and...
exactly, I try and...
Don't shy away. Keep out of my way.
But I simply haven't a voice for radio. It's as simple as that.
But Cooke's technical knowledge gave him a rare power in the pirate radio scene. And in 1976, he was ready to make his move and take over Radio Dublin.
And what we didn't realise was he was making another transmitter. Then he came along and said, I want to have a look at the transmitter to do an adjustment. And so I switched on the following weekend and I found blankety blank. But then Cooke was appearing on the same frequency on this new transmitter. So he had effectively sabotaged my transmitter and reinstated his transmitter, and he made some announcement to say Dr. Don has retired. So straight away he had just completely planned it and executed it.
And so that's how Eamon Cooke took control of Radio Dublin. He didn't set up the station, he stole it and called himself the captain, the self-proclaimed godfather of Irish pirate radio. Later, Cooke would describe the whole episode rather differently.
I got involved in Radio Dublin. It was then a very small station operating on Sunday afternoons, sometimes Saturday afternoons, and very low power. We had very short range, maybe a mile, maybe 2 miles. We were quite happy to play records and take in the odd few requests. Well, sometime last year, there was a split in the ranks. Yes, there was a disagreement over station policy and a number of other things. And myself and Dr. Don parted on fairly amiable terms.
Not quite so amiable, according to Dr. Don.
I decided I'd go and visit Cooke. And I knocked on his door and I asked him what he was playing at, because at this point I knew. Again, I was just getting to know the other side of Cooke at this stage. So I wasn't a tough guy, but I was from Ballyfermot, so I could pretend to be tough. And I remember telling him quite clearly that that transmitter and that signal and that frequency is mine. He will not take it away. I said, I'll come over and I'll do so much damage that you'll be a very sorry man. And his answer was, shall I get a gun and I go over and I shoot you? And I laughed. And I said, you'll probably go to jail for that. And he said, it wouldn't be the first time.
Eamon Cooke had now relieved Don Moore of both the Radio Dublin transmitter and the 253 medium wave frequency.
He always liked to be the controller and he loved the attention. And I think it gave him a certain feeling of being somebody.
But when he's drinking, lusting, and his hunger for power begins
Eamon Cooke was now running Radio Dublin from his home on Sarsfield Road in a studio he'd set up in his front room with borrowed record decks. It was an amazing coup d'etat. And, as he later described, he immediately started to ramp things up.
Our range was not great, so we had to improve. That on Christmas week we started off 7-day-a-week operation on Radio Dublin, and we haven't ceased since, barring the odd visit from the authorities, which is a hazard of broadcasting.
Radio Dublin now acted as a magnet for children in the locality and beyond, who all began arriving at Eamon Cooke's house, which was now the home of Radio Dublin.
The enticement for us to go into the house was he got us to answer the phones. But sure, we were only kids.
By now, the radio station was broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, something that had never before happened in Ireland.
I was like a celebrity in school. Oh, Siobhan can go to Radio Dublin. And innocently I said to one, would you like to come with me? I brought 2 different girls into that radio station. And they lived nowhere near Inchicore when I think about it.
Eamon Cooke continued to abuse children in the room directly above the studio, often while the station was on air, as Siobhan remembers.
You got to know the people coming into the house, the DJs that was coming in. I remember them doing their broadcast. They used to sit in the front room, and we used to run up and down to the shop for them.
In the early days of Radio Dublin, under Eamon Cooke's direction, many of the voices and DJs that graced the airwaves went on to become household names, some even still broadcasting today.
Hi there, good afternoon. You're tuned to the Marty Hall Show, Radio Dublin. Time band time, 4 minutes past 12.
I remember Marty Whelan, James Dillon, Dave Fanning.
And the oldie show extended from now till 1:30 for you, all right?
They just got used to seeing us there, just like we got used to Eamon Cooke. So they wouldn't really suspect anything because there were so many children around. And as I said, both sexes.
And the next 15 minutes is brought to you with the compliments of the Chariot Inn, Ranelagh.
There's absolutely no indication that those working in Radio Dublin were aware of Cooke's abusive behaviour.
My memory of Radio Dublin was the place was always crawling with children. It was always, I think I was 19 when I was first there, and I thought they were young, so they must have been very young indeed.
The station was chaos, and it was filthy, and everything was everywhere, and even the kitchen, it was just a mess. In hindsight, it was a horrible place to be, but it was a playground for us.
Talk about sexual abuse wasn't part of Irish society back then. It's as if no one believed it was happening.
My mother in the 70s, in her world, in her mind, in her whole view of men and women, the idea that a man would sexually engage in any way with a child did not ever come on their radars. It was completely out with anything that they had ever conceived.
The parents were very innocent as well. But then when the radio station came, they still didn't think it was odd. They thought it was great because the kids were getting involved in something. So you'd never think anything like that in your wildest dreams would be happening on your doorstep.
But for Siobhan, Anne and many in their childhood circle, abuse was happening right on their doorstep.
Well, it was over a period of years. I was 7 years of age, I think, when I went into the garage first. And say 7 to 8, you were in the garage, you were in the garden. Then it came to 8 to 9, it was the house, and the bedroom started around that time.
At 9 years of age, Anne struggled to understand what was happening, but her mind was full of secrets and fears.
So there are specific things that I remember. I remember at age 9 when we were all out in the street, somebody discovered how babies were made. So I now began to convince myself that there was a baby growing inside me, and what was I going to do? And I'd be lying in bed looking at my tummy. It was difficult. That was a really scary time.
Cooke would often abuse Siobhan and Anne together.
Eamon Cooke was very good at pairing up children. I'm not sure why, whether it was to create a second level of fear, because any fear he would give to us individually, we would then share it together as well. We would be worried together, if you like, strengthening it. Siobhan and I were paired, so very often if we were in there together, the abuse was on both of us.
Join us in episode 3 as things start to become clear for everyone.
I decided to do my own little investigation, and I went upstairs into a room, which I believe was a bedroom, and I noticed there was one of these cameras for filming, and I decided to take a look at some of the reels that were on the table.
If you know anything about Eamon Cooke, please contact us in confidence at documentaries@rte.ie, or you can leave an anonymous tip on rte.ie/pirate predator.
So that was a really pivotal point for me to know I don't want this. And then when I started to resist, a lot of people followed me also.
If you've been affected by any issues raised in this episode, please visit rte.ie/helplines. Your support will really help other listeners discover Pirate Predator. So please consider telling your friends about the series, share it on your social media, or leave a positive comment or rating wherever you listen. Pirate Predator is narrated by me, Peter Mulryan. The series is produced by myself,
together with me, Nicoline Greer,
and me, Shauna McGreevy,
and me, Liam O'Brien.
The music is composed and performed by me, Alma Kelliher, with Ste Carolan on guitars.
And sound design is by me, Damian Chennells.
And special thanks to Peninsula Television for the use of archive audio. Until next time, thanks for listening.